So there was a beautiful song in beautiful line from Beth's song, which is why I wanted her to do it before the talk. And it said, "Lately I'm beginning to find that I should be the one behind the wheel." Anybody ever have that realization in your life? That aha moment, all of a sudden you're walking and something happens and you're doing something and you realize, I'm not really behind the wheel. Maybe I've fallen asleep. Maybe I've given the wheel to somebody else or something else. But lately, as spiritual seekers, we are waking up to the truth that we need to be the one that is behind the wheel of our lives. There's even songs written that say, Jesus, take the wheel. Jesus, take the wheel. And here in Unity, we say, let go, let God a lot. And we want to give that wheel up. But today is all about taking the wheel, claiming it as our own, and directing our own lives. But I thought I'd give you a few statistics before we got started that are germane to what we're talking about today. The National Traffic Safety Administration estimates that annually 100,000 police-reported crashes are the result of drivers falling asleep. Unity Worldwide Ministries Conservatory of Sleep Studies estimates that a weekly average of 112 people fall asleep in church every single Sunday. The Reverend Richard Burdick Institute of Higher Learning Through Sleepwalking has estimated that on any given day that 93.6% of the population has fallen asleep at the wheel of their life at least once. Sometimes it's a daily occurrence, isn't it? And then finally, the most important statistic I have for you is, it's a little-known fact that 58.3% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So, for centuries upon centuries, sages and teachers and spiritual masters have cautioned us about staying awake. Not just behind the wheel of a car because that leads to a crash, but the wheel of your life because that will also lead to a crash as well. Masters have been telling us and cautioning us to be careful, to be mindful, to be awake, to be alert. They've been giving us what I call today the AAAAA recovery program. What is that? The AAAAA recovery program. And you have notes. I'm going to invite you if you want to take notes and make sure I'm honest. Because last service they said, what was number 4? You left it out. I looked at my notes and said, there is no number 4. No. It is about being awake. It is about being aware. It is about being alert. It is about being attentive. And most importantly to me, it is about being accountable. So the 5 A's, awake, aware, alert, attentive, and accountable. Spiritual masters have cautioned us to do this, to have the growing, evolving fullness of a spiritual existence and a spiritual life. The Buddha was asked over and over and over again, are you a god? Are you a great teacher? Are you a sage? Are you a prophet? What are you? And every single time he was very consistent. What did he answer? I am awake. Pretty simple teaching, isn't it? Simple, not easy. Simple, not easy. I am awake. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is Jesus when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane and he keeps going back again and again to his disciples to say, stay awake. Don't fall asleep. He was going through a pretty major, dark time in his life, and he asked those to stay awake and to be present with him. This is a great analogy, a metaphor of the Christ of our being, the divine essence of our being, constantly speaking to us. Don't fall asleep to what is true. Don't fall asleep to who you truly are, to the Buddha of your divine nature, the Christ of your divine nature, whatever you want to call it. You are more than your human experience. And in this human experience, which sometimes has crucifixions in it, dark nights of the soul, we shut down. We give the wheel over to somebody else, and we fall asleep. That's what the masters and sages were asking us to do, to be awake and alert. Many people in the human condition think, well, this teaching means I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to be more productive. I need to work harder at my life. Well, those are wonderful things, but those are magnificent effects of a deeper insight and a deeper reality. Many people will say, well, that means I need to be more grateful, or I need to be more thoughtful, and I need to think more in my life. And those are fantastic effects of a deeper cause, a deeper reality. They'll say, well, I need to quit wasting so much time and be more productive in my life. And again, that's a magnificent effect that has a cause at a deeper place. You see, this being awake, this being alert, accountable, and attentive, is about being, not doing. It is a state of being, not a state of doing. The Naked Now by Richard Rohr. This is the book I'm using, and this is in the bookstore. I invite you to get it. He puts it beautifully when he says, being conscious or aware means I drop to a level deeper than the passing show. I'm in the world. I'm not of the world. I become the calm seer of my dramas from that deeper level. How many of you have dramas in your life? Dramas are usually when we go to sleep at the wheel. I become a seer, a conscious noticer at a deeper place. I watch myself compassionately, and I want to underline the word compassionately, from a little distance, almost as if the myself I'm witnessing is somebody else. I disidentify with my own emotional noise. Does anybody here have emotional noise besides me? Please tell me I'm not the only one. And I no longer let that emotional noise pull me here and there, up and down. When you're being pulled here and there, up and down, it's a clear indication that somebody else is driving the car. Some other energy is driving the car of your life. I stop thinking about this or that. And again, I underline, I stop thinking so much. And I collapse into pure consciousness. Collapse. What is the word collapse? Turn it over to God. And the new and broader sense of me soon begins to feel like my deepest and my truer self. I begin to unveil the Christ of my being, the Buddha nature of my being, the Atman of my very being. And at that point, God, consciousness, me, silence, emptiness, and fullness all start to feel like the same wonderful thing. It's all God. It's all good. It's all oneness. And that's not going to be found in being more busy, in more doing, more in the world of effects. It is allowing ourselves to be in a state of being. So he's talking about the level of the Christ, the level of the Buddha, the level of who we truly are. Now, that sounds really simple, doesn't it? It is very simple. Is it easy? Not necessarily easy, because it's going to require some things of us. And I'm going to give you 3 things that the spiritual life requires of us. Walking and being and breathing as the Christ, walking and being and breathing as the Buddha requires 3 things that are very, very important. We don't talk about 2 of them very often in this church. And the first one is discipline. Discipline. You know, we're a pretty loosey-goosey kind of group of people. Yet discipline is absolutely essential if we are going to be staying awake to who we truly are. I looked up the definition for discipline. Acting in accordance with the rules is one of those definitions. Acting in accordance with the rules. We know in this church, in this community, that God as law has set up patterns, repeatable processes in the laboratory of our existence whereby we create, whereby we manifest the life that we want to have. Good or not so good. And here's the thing about laws. They are not respecters of human beings. The law of gravity does not care if you use it awake or you are asleep to it. Awake, gravity allows you to fly. Asleep, gravity sets you up for a crash. Well, the same is true with spiritual things such as cause and effect, the law of mental equivalence, the law of giving and receiving, the laws of prosperity. These are all laws that God has put in place and then stepped back and said, now go create. It's like, here's the great car. The father and the mother who say, here's the car. It's yours, to the teenager. And then they step back and go, hands off. Sometimes the car ends up crashing. Sometimes the kids are safe, but it's all, the responsibility is on the teenager at that point. Well, the same is true with us. God, as law, has put these patterns into place so that we may manifest the life that we desire, and it will not interfere with our use or non-use of those laws. Systematic, repeatable, organized methods of living, of breathing, of being, and creating. And they are working 24/7. We cannot escape the laboratory that we have been given to create. As Jesus and Buddha did, we must be conscious. We must be awake. We must be aware. So what are the disciplines that we need to cultivate? I'm going to give you some disciplines that I believe we need to cultivate, and I'm going to draw a wonderful analogy to driving the car. There are some disciplines you need when driving that car. What's the first if you start to go asleep? Notice the warning signs. We need to be aware, awake, alert enough to notice the warning signs. What are the warning signs when you're behind the wheel of a car? Anybody see this posture before? It's a wake-up call. Bam, wake up. The road begins to get a little foggy. That's a wake-up sign. I need to do something different. Your mind begins to wander, and you're no longer focusing on the task of driving, but you're focusing on something else. It is an indication that you are off center with what is yours to do driving. Life is absolutely the same way. Hey, buddy. Hi, buddy. How's it going? I caught him off guard. Did you see the look on his face? I've had that look in board meetings before. Who, me? So we are to pay attention to the warning signs. So what are the warning signs in our lives, in our spiritual path? If I'm feeling anger, if I'm feeling resentment, if I'm feeling unforgiveness, these are warning signs. They are indications that I am starting to fall asleep. I am starting to let go of what is true, and I am starting to put my focus elsewhere. If I am feeling conflict and everything on the road of life is coming my direction at me, it's a clear indication I may have fallen asleep and I've crossed over a lane or two. So the first discipline we need to have as spiritual seekers is to start paying attention. Paying attention to the warning signs. The second one is, what do you do? What do you do when you fall asleep or start to fall asleep at the wheel? What's the first thing you should do? Pull over. Somebody said it. Pull over. Stop doing what you are doing and get off the road. I've done that, and it usually keeps you safe. I've kept going and tried to push through and crank the radio. You ever do that? Crank the radio, crank the air conditioning unit, roll the windows down, start screaming and yelling at the top of my lungs to stay awake. It does not work. It is an indication, a discipline, that when you notice that your life is off track, and you're not feeling that deep connection to the Christ being, pull off to the side of the road. Do something different. I'm going to liken this to a meditation practice, to a practice of Sabbath. How many of you really have a regular day of Sabbath? Sabbath is a huge, important spiritual practice. It is pulling off the side of the road to replenish. It's peace. But just stop doing what you're doing, because that's the definition of insanity. You keep doing it, you're going to get the same thing. So discipline number 2 is pull off the road. Number 3. Now, I don't know about you, and I got some booze for service when I said this. What I do when I notice falling asleep, I go get some caffeine. I'll go get the biggest Coke I can possibly get down my throat and drink it. Or coffee. Go get some coffee to get that hit that wakes my body up, that says, no, I want to be awake. I want to be awake. I don't want to crash. Now, I'm not recommending caffeine, but I am recommending that you have a practice, a discipline of getting spiritual caffeine wherever you can get it. Sometimes it's a book. Sometimes it's a workshop. Sometimes it's a Wednesday service. Go figure. Sometimes it's an affirmation. Sometimes it's a class. Sometimes it's just calling somebody up on the phone and said, remind me of truth. Can we dialogue? Can we talk some about truth? And many times it's Sunday morning. You know, people often look at Sunday morning and the benefit of a service like this, and they say, oh, what's great? I get to hear some great music. That's not the benefit of this. I get to talk. That's not the benefit of this. I get to see people and be in community. That is a benefit, but it's not the main benefit. This is your spiritual caffeine. This is your reminder of who you truly are. You pull off to the side of the road occasionally, have a Sabbath, and go spend time with people who will remind you in a caffeinated way that you are magnificent, you are whole, you are the Christ, you are the Buddha, and you are not this endeavor. You are not this diagnosis. You are not this challenge. You are more. You are more. You are more. That is a discipline, and it doesn't happen once in a while. The spiritual path is not just a once-in-a-while kind of a thing. It is a regular practice of discipline, which takes us to the second practice, diligence. Diligence. I looked up diligence. It says careful, persistent, and consistent effort. You see, the spiritual path is not something you do when you're comfortable. It's not something you do when you've got time and you squeeze it into the spaces in your life. It is something that is the number one priority in your life. If you want a growing life, a growing experience, a growing awareness of God, of Christness, of light and love and life everywhere, be diligent about your practice. Be careful, be persistent, and be consistent. You don't squeeze God into the cracks, because a spiritual path is not a hobby. It is a way of life. It is a way of being. Third thing, the third discipline we need to absolutely cultivate is self-awareness. How many of us really, really and truly take stock of our life and the way we are doing life on a regular basis? This is a crucial discipline to have, to notice where the blind spots are. Where am I having a need for growth? Where is there a reaction that I had to somebody or to something that really needs to be looked at? And we talk a lot in this community, I'm whole, I'm perfect, I'm complete just the way God created me. Absolutely true at a spiritual level. But if you are asleep, you are not operating from the spiritual level. You're operating from the human level. So a regular practice, a diligent practice of self-awareness. Here's an area of growth for me. Will you sit down and talk with me and work through it? Will I get a book that helps me get through it? Or will I take time in the quiet and the stillness to reflect and communicate and have a relationship with the divine essence of my being that points me a way out of the darkness, a way out of the behavior, a way out of the habits? So what are some of the habits that we have? What are the things that drive our lives? Anybody have any bad habits? Just me, just the caffeine, right? But what happens if you are falling asleep, it's not that there's nobody at the wheel. Something will come in and take the wheel. An energy, an old thought will take the wheel. So here are my questions for you today, and I invite you to answer them honestly for yourself. Are you driving your life today, or are old fears, old wounds, and old hurts driving your life? We've all experienced it. There are moments when those wounds and those hurts take over. It's an indication, I'm falling asleep. Wake up. Are you driving your life today, or are the relationships in your life driving it? Anybody have a relationship like that, where all the power is given away to somebody, or some situation in a family or at work? We have the power. The only power that exists in the universe is right here, right now, to have the life that I want. Don't give your power away by falling asleep and giving it to somebody in a relationship. Are you driving your life today, or is money? There was a moment in the life of this church where we had to come to the realization that we were making decisions based upon money, not upon spiritual truth, based upon the bank account and not on spiritual grounding. And let me tell you, when we had that realization, did the self-awareness shifted in our minds and in our hearts, is when this church became abundant, and only then. So are you driving your life today, or a belief in lack, need, or want? Are you driving your life today, or is it the need to be right, the need to be justified, the need to be accepted, the need to be important, the need to feel special, the need to be greater than somebody else? Ego is the first energy that will grab the wheel if you start to fall asleep. The human mind, which believes in duality, which believes in separation, is the first thing. And then we get into an us and them, a you and a me division, which is the cause of all suffering on the planet. We stay awake to driving our life, and don't let that human ego get in the way. And here's one, the final one I'll put out there. Are you driving your life, or has boredom grabbed the wheel? Be honest with yourself. Self-awareness here. Has anybody ever gotten bored with your spiritual path? Be honest. I see some heads. It happens. It absolutely happens. We hit plateaus. We hit plateaus on our spiritual path. We hit it in our day-to-day relationships, our life, our work life, our family life. We hit plateaus. And I want to give you some spiritual counsel that my wife gave to every foster child that came into our home. There's no such thing as boring situations. There is no such thing as a boring spiritual life. But what there is such a thing as are boring people who have fallen asleep to the truth that they are creative. Boring people who fall asleep at the wheel of their life and give over all the responsibility to your entertainment, to your value, to your worth, to your light, to something else or somebody else. There are no boring spiritual paths. Every one of them is holy, sacred, beautiful, and wonderful. Yours, mine, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, all of them. There's no such thing as a boring path. Just a boring person who is an indication that I've fallen asleep and I've given the power away. Take the wheel back, and I challenge you to do something outrageous. If you're feeling bored with your spiritual path, do something completely outrageous and wild today. Just wait till after the service is done. So here's a way to find out. We want to get a litmus test. I want to give you a tool to go home to find out, am I in a place of asleepness? Am I sleepwalking, or am I awake to my life? Life happens pretty much this way. I know it's black and white here, but I'm going to give it as about black and white as I can. This is the way life happens. Everything good, everything not so good. Stimulus. A, stimulus. Something happens in your life. Somebody says something in your life. You have an experience in your life. There's a stimulus. It arouses some energies within you, good, bad, or otherwise. Then, 2, we make up a story. Letter B, we make up a story about what just happened. Sometimes the stories are true. Sometimes the stories are not so true, but this is the way life happens. This happened, I make up a story based upon the lens that I'm looking through. Yes? Then I have an emotional response. I'm going to emotionally respond to my story. You see, I'm not responding necessarily to what happened. I'm responding to the story I made up about what happened. Here's an emotional response, and then D, I act. That action, 9 times out of 10, will be a great indication if I am asleep or if I am awake to the life that I am wanting to create. Because here's the big question. Here's the big litmus test. Between any one of these 4 steps of creation, can I stop? Can I pull off the side of the road? Can I breathe? And can I assess from a different place than reaction? So, stimulus happens. Karen does something. Karen does something. Can I stop and pause and breathe and pull off to the side of the road and go, isn't that interesting? Before I make up a story. Before I start to judge Karen for what she said or what she did. When I make up a story about it, which 9 times out of 10 has no basis in reality and all the basis in my past conditioning and my past judgments and my past fears and my past experiences. Can I take a breath, step back? If I can, I'm awake. I'm at the wheel of my life. If I cannot, guess what? It's an indication I have fallen asleep. So between the story, so Karen says something, I make up my story about it. There's still time. There's still time. But if I don't take that breath, I'm kind of starting to look like this at my life. Turn the radio up. I'm going to have an emotional response to that story. Can I pause, pull off the side of the road, breathe, step back, and go, what does it mean? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it real? I take the power back in that moment. I take the power back, and I begin to have an emotion that is based upon Christed eyes, Buddha heart, the Atman of my perfection soul that I was created in and as. If I can do that, if I do that, it's a clear indication I'm awake. If I cannot do that and the emotion is already there, guess what? The reptilian mind has taken over. The human mind is taking over, and I am in full falling asleep at the wheel, and I'm about ready to hit a crash. But there's still time. I have the emotional response. Before I step out, I lash out in fight or flight, which is a very human response. Can I stop, look, listen, breathe? If I can, I've grabbed the wheel of my life. If I cannot, something is driving the car, and we're headed for a crash. I invite you to play with that idea this week. With everything that's going on in your life, to play with that idea. I'm going to leave you with one final thought from Richard Rohr. Again, this book is in the bookstore. I really invite you to get it. It's a priceless gem. The aware mind allows you to enjoy the inherent aliveness in all things, not just the things I like or the good things, in all things, and in yourself, before things and people are categorized or deemed worthy or unworthy, important or unimportant. This is the third eye, the eye of the true self, the eye of the Christ, the eye of the Buddha. This is what it means to pay attention and to access the source. This week, when you find yourself wanting to yell, Jesus, take the wheel. Jesus, take the wheel. Buddha, take the wheel. God, take the wheel. Anybody take the wheel. I want to give you the final quote before we go into our meditation. Jesus put it very clearly, and I have never, ever seen this scripture. I don't know how I've missed it. It's in the book of Mark, chapter 13. He says it pretty clearly. What I say to you, I say to all. What I say to you, I say to all. You know what Jesus said? Stay awake. That's it. Stay awake. If the Buddha's doing it, if the Christ did it, we are being called to do the same. This week, may it be an adventure of driving down the freeway of life, fully awake, alert, attentive, accountable